Tracy has authored 66 books, traveled across 66 countries, giving insights to corporations and individuals. He has spoken on leadership, personal development, time management, business and sales training, and his knowledge has helped many people, as he continually attests, become great leaders and indeed make a lot of money when selling their products and growing great organizations. We had this opportunity. We're talking to Mr. Brian Tracy. We're going to look at the youth, Africa, and technology. Welcome, Brian. Without particular bias here in Kenya, first of all, the population of Kenya is mostly young, below the age of 30, 32, yes. About 70%. If there were 3 gems that you would give the youth of Kenya and Africa in general, what would they be?
Well, the most important thing is to learn skills that make you valuable for people to hire. A job is an opportunity to get results for people that they value and that they will pay for. And the problem worldwide, not just in Kenya, is many young people, even with good educations, have no marketable skills. They have no ability to do any work. And so they have to start at the bottom and learn one skill at a time. So that would be the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing would be to set goals. Set goals for yourself and your life and your career and write them down and make plans to achieve them and work on them every day.
What would the duration of those goals be?
It depends upon the individual. They can be 1-week goals or 1-year goals or 10-year goals. And the third is to devote your life to continuous learning, continuous personal development, continuous reading and upgrading of your skills. This is the great strategy for success in the world today, is never stop learning new information and new skills that you can use to become more valuable.
And when you look at the continent of Africa, moving to the corporate sector, you were recently in Nigeria,
yes,
Tanzania, and
yes,
now in Kenya, with some exposure to corporate life and some of
yes,
the challenges that you've seen. What are those challenges that you've received from some of the people who you've had conversation with?
The big challenges are the challenges that take place all over Africa, where it is very difficult for business people to grow businesses because of regulation and corruption and political problems and so on. So you find the countries where it's the easiest to start and build a business are also the most prosperous, and they have no unemployment. So I think, not just in Kenya, but worldwide, the primary function of government is to create an environment where people are eager to start new businesses. Every new business creates 3 to 5 new jobs. If people start businesses at a high rate, soon all the unemployed are absorbed into the workforce. So it's the most important thing the government can do is create the environment, like creating the soil for a flower to grow, create the environment for entrepreneurship to grow.
How does business engage government so that that situation that you say is ideal would come to fruition?
Well, unfortunately today, the only way business can engage government is by paying bribes. And that's unfortunate because it makes it less and less attractive to do business. There's less and less money to hire people. There's less and less confidence or enthusiasm to grow a business and so on. So change really has to start with leadership in government and with a commitment to serving the people and creating economic opportunities for the people rather than economic benefit for themselves.
So it's more of an attitude change, a personality issue with the leaders that has to be addressed.
Yes.
And corporate business will just have to wait until that happens.
Well, corporate business cannot do very much. Just like young people cannot change the system, corporations cannot change the system either.
Right. Well, looking at what is already working and the place of technology, I haven't heard you talk a lot about it, but what would be your take with regard to technology and helping business grow?
Well, technology is a method of communication. All technology speeds up communications of some kind. So it's a tool. It's a tool like a car or a truck to go from place to place. Technology is a tool to get information from place to place. And so, of course, people who can move information faster have a market advantage, which is why companies that build technology are always trying to improve it and make it faster and easier to use.
Okay. You have a lot of knowledge you've just shared with us with regard to the youth, the insights that you've given, technology and Africa, the direction it might go, and you captured this in 66 books so far. What's the system, a highlight of the system in writing so many books and churning out knowledge?
As you know, I do about 3 hours worth of reading every day, so I'm constantly upgrading my knowledge. I read everything that I can, morning, noon, and night. And so I built up a very large mental storehouse of knowledge. And then I can sit down and put it all together and pour it out on paper and create books and articles out of it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think I'll keep it that brief. It's been a long day for you.
Thank you.
But thank you for indulging us in this brief interview. I hope we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Brian. Azim Jamal has East African heritage. He grew up in Tanzania before moving to Canada for 34 years of his life to this day. But his experience is one that is very personal, and he talks very personally about balance and, as he says, business and beyond. He shares with us the spiritual aspect, his beliefs and philosophy, and how that has influenced business and how he came down to being the corporate Sufi. Welcome, Azim. You had a life-changing experience in Afghanistan. Tell me briefly about this.
Well, what happened is I was an accountant with 3 degrees, and I've been spending an average at that time about 25 hours a week on a voluntary capacity. That's part of my mission and purpose in life. And I was sent to work with the Afghan refugees in Karachi as an accountant because I had 3 professional accounting degrees, and my job was to do a budget for the refugees. So I spent 6 weeks there, and my life has never been the same, but there was one incident that really changed my life. I went to a small hut to interview them to see how much money they need to live on the hut, and there were about 14 Afghan refugees in the hut, and there was a washroom and kitchen and mosquitoes, and the environment was so pathetic that in 20 minutes I got physically sick. So I couldn't continue asking them questions, so I walked out of the hut. And as soon as I walked out of the hut, the whole village was standing outside, mostly women and children, because most men had died in war. And I was so shaken that I didn't know what to do. I could see an Afghan child with rosy cheeks and big eyes and a smile on their face, despite their plight. But I was too shaken to do anything. As a coward, I walked away, took my cab to go to Marriott Hotel, which was a 25-minute ride in the hot, blazing weather in Karachi. And I was shivering, and I was sweating in the back of the cab, and I cried and I cried and I cried like a baby. And that 25 minutes ride, I call it my defining moment in my life, because I reached the hotel, and in the lobby my colleague was waiting for me, or was there, and he asked me, "What's wrong with you?" I hadn't even said a word because he saw in my face some pain. And I told him that if I had to die for one cause, I would die for a cause like this, to help people like this. And I went in my room and had a sleepless night, and I said, I died, big deal. What did I do? How did I help them? Nothing. So I went through the sleepless night and I said, what can I do in my life that can help people like this? And I realized that even though I had 3 professional accounting degrees, I wasn't passionate. I would never be the top accountant in the world. But I used to speak in those days as a hobby, and people called me to Australia and New Zealand and France, and I used to go and speak. I didn't get paid, but they paid my flight and my hotel. And every time I came back, after 3-6 months, they'd call me again. So I said, these guys are calling me, paying a few $1,000s each time they call me, and I'm just doing it as a hobby. But if I did it as a kind of profession and talked about giving, I could make a significant difference to the people and to the cause that I'm really excited about. And so I set a vision for myself at that time, 3 visions.
What's the vision?
The vision was, number 1 was that in 10 years, I'll write about giving and sell 5.7 billion copies of my books.
Achieved. And
the reason I said 5.7 million is because there are 5.7 billion people in the world, so I took a fraction. I said that I will raise $40 million and give it for charity, and I'll be one of the finest inspirational speakers in the world, at least top 10, so when I speak, people hear my message, otherwise who's Azim? So those are my 3 goals, and of course I struggled so much that I was going nowhere. First of all, when I made a decision, I went home and told my wife. She said, what? My son was 3, my daughter was 8, and she said, how are you going to support them for university? So eventually I was able to convince her on one condition, and the condition was that she said, we don't sell our accounting businesses. And I listened to her, and I'm so glad I listened to her, otherwise I've been bankrupt.
Thank God. Huh?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time. My first book, I spent 10,000 hours. I couldn't even put a book in the bookstore. And I went to a bookstore called Chapters in Vancouver, which is the biggest bookstore in Canada, to check my first book out. Now, you don't go in the bookstore and ask for your own book. It looks pathetic, right? So I go in the computer and I put 7. And the computer blurts out that there are 70 books on 7. So I go through each one, up and down, sideways, upways, this ways. I couldn't find my book. So I put happiness. The computer said there are 70 books on happiness-related topics, and I went through up, down, sideways. My book was not there. And I said, what kind of bookstore is this? And I put my name, Azim, A-Z-I-M, Jamal, J-A-M-A, but I did not put L. I looked back, I said, anybody looking? Anybody? Nobody's looking, so I put L. The computer blurts out, author. I said, yes, finally something. Author, unknown. I said, my God, I gave every inch, every ounce, every passion. I gave everything I had. Can't even put a book in the bookstore. Forget about helping the Afghan refugees. I can't even help myself. I was depressed. I was walking away from the computer, and there's one small book staring at me. I'm saying, what's your problem? Do you know I've been reading on average 2 books a week, and look where I am, and the last thing I want to do now is read a book. Forget it. So I was walking away, and the book is following me like a beacon, like a light. And I'm trying to...
What's the book?
I want to come to it in a minute. I'm trying to ignore it. And so I reached the door of the Chapters bookstore, and I had 3 choices. Either go to the bathroom, or go to my car, or go to the book. As Dr. Covey would say, Stephen Covey would say, it's called the moment of integrity. So in the moment of integrity, I decided to go to the book, but I decided I'm only going to read the introduction. So I pick up the book and read the introduction. The story of a guy who goes to Second World War, comes back from Second World War and selling life insurance. And nobody's buying life insurance because nobody's dying after World War II, and he's going broke. So his wife divorces him, his kid leaves him, and he gets drunk every day. One day, he had lost everything. He only had $30 left in his pocket. He was walking in the month of November in Cleveland when he came across a pawn shop. In the pawn shop, there's a gun being sold for $29 and a bullet for $1. He says, I buy the gun, I buy the bullet, and that's it. But he writes, he was so drunk, he didn't have the spine to go in the store, wait in the lineup, buy the gun, buy the bullet, put the bullet in the gun, find a place to kill himself. It was too much work. So he kept walking. Came across a library. And he wandered in the library, and it was warm inside and cold outside. So he was wandering and came to a section on self-help, motivation, and he picked up a book. And I read the book, and he liked the book. So he kept going back to read more books until one day he came across a book by W. Clement Stone and Napoleon Hill called Success Through Positive Mental Attitudes, and he loved the book. This is how I meet the authors. He found out that W. Clement Stone was the president of a corporation, and there was a branch in the city he lived in, so he went to apply for a job in the branch selling. And after some time, the editor of the company retires, so he goes to apply for a job as an editor because he wants to meet W. Clement Stone. And because he's reading so many books, he convinces the guy to give him a job as an editor. And at that time, he writes his first book. Now, how many books will this guy sell? Look at me, I've traveled the world, I was an accountant, I worked so hard. I can't even put a book in the bookstore. How many books can this guy sell? One to his cousin, one to the library, one to himself? Have a guess.
I don't know.
Well, when I read that book in that time, he sold 36 million, and now he has sold 50 million.
Which book is this?
And the guy's name is Og Mandino, and the first book he wrote was called The Greatest Salesman in the World, which sold 10 million copies, and that's the book that came to me. I ran home and went to my website, corporatesufi.com, and put a quote, when the night is the darkest, dawn is the closest. Things still didn't change overnight, but gradually started to change, and then my success started. I became #1 on Amazon, beat Harry Potter with my book Power of Giving, became #1 on Barnes & Noble, Amazon twice, Penguin picked up the book. Now in many languages, I've been #1 in India, #2 in Turkey, so it's worked out, but it was a long, long journey. But I realized, when you're at your lowest point, that's when somebody helps you and say, look, don't give up.
And you've had several low points. I mean, you gave us the story just now of, is it high school? Difficult high school.
From 6.
From 6, difficult. University finally. There was a light.
Yes, I picked the right subjects, yeah.
But there was no passion.
Well, it wasn't bad. At that time it was good because I had gone from complete failure to success, so it was good and I enjoyed accounting.
Okay.
But the enemy of the best is not the worst. The enemy of the best is the good.
Yes.
I settled for good, which is accounting, but not the best.
Yes.
And that's the tragedy with most people. They settle for the good.
If I can shift gears, you talk a lot about the time that you wake up at 2 a.m. I don't know whether you still wake up at 2 a.m., but I recall you talking about waking up at 2 a.m. You have a routine that takes about an hour or two every morning, and you're big on balance. You mention it as key to business and going beyond. What's at the root of your balance?
Very good question. First, to answer the question about time, wake up time, if I had a choice, and ideally, I would like to sleep at 8 p.m. and wake up at 1 a.m. And work from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. and then meditate from 4 to 5 a.m. and then go to the gym and then continue until 8 p.m. I'm a dead duck and I go to sleep, right?
Yeah.
So that's my ideal. But with my travel schedule and all this, it really messes it up because, when you're traveling, I mean, we're not going to go to bed at 8 p.m. today, right?
Yeah.
So it messes up. But I stick to the 4 a.m. That's my meditation time. And the reason I wake up at 1 a.m. is because my work is creative, insightful. I get paid for insights. So at 1 a.m. everybody's sleeping. So I'm working and I'm thinking and I'm writing and I'm reading. And I look at the watch, 1:10. The clock stops because there's no phone calls, no interruptions, no emails. So I get so much done. And people say to me, but my wife goes to sleep at 1 and I wake up at 1, so where's your balance? So we have a plan. I asked my wife, what will make you happy? She said, if I go out twice a week for dinner, for coffee, for movie, I'll be very happy. So we schedule 2 days when we go out. So I come home late. And the rest of the days, we're okay. If we go out 3 days, we start fighting, so 2 is enough, right? So that's how it is. In terms of my message, the core, I think, I studied happiness, as you know. My first book was 7 Steps to Lasting Happiness. I spent 10,000 hours doing that. And I realized, ultimately, everybody's looking for happiness. Why do people want success in business? Because they want to make money, they want to have power, they want to have fame. Why? Because they think money, power, fame will make me happy. Everything we do, we're actually seeking happiness. And so I realized that, happiness is a byproduct of the harmony of business, balance, and beyond.
Let me throw a spanner in the works.
Sure.
Happiness, they say, is fleeting. Many people reach the pinnacle of success as quoted based on money, house, and everything. And the one thing they say on their deathbed, I wish I could remember someone who said it, is that, it meant really not much to them.
Yeah, and one of the things I learned in 10,000 hours of my work in happiness is that it's very profound. Happiness is not a destination. Happiness is a journey. If I'm not happy talking to you right now, nothing else will make me happy. So it's really a question of realizing that severing the journey, the hardship, the joy, the victory, the defeat, having passion what you do, and doing it for the right reason. I mean, if you're doing something that that you have a gift that God has given you, and that gift is to really create hope, ignite a spark, create positivity, then that process is the joy, the happiness, and the fulfillment. There's nothing else. It's not about the results. I mean, you like to get good results, of course, but if you, in the process, shortchange what your purpose is, then the results will not have as much impact as the impact that you can make in a person's life, right? So I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, the external things are not what makes you happy. Happiness is not an external factor. Happiness is an internal matter. Yeah? Helen Keller was blind, she was deaf, she was whatever, and she found happiness in her life. Napoleon.
Sorry to interject. So what is it that, because you said you did 10,000 hours of study in happiness, so what is it? What's the system to happiness? What is the thing that you perceive as that which gives true internal happiness?
So there are 7 steps in my book, but let me tell you first the big picture, and then I can tell you the 7 steps if you're interested. First one is I mentioned that, I didn't mention today, but it was the best way to get happiness is to give happiness. If I can make you happy, really make you happy, I feel happy. Because happiness is like a shadow. The more you follow it, the more it eludes you. The more you walk away and give it to others, it follows you. So when you give happiness, you get happiness. And that's beautiful. Secondly, most of the unhappiness comes from ego. When you're so self-centered about you, then write every problem, you'll find every problem you're involved. So you're the problem, that's your ego. Fear comes from ego. Judgment comes from ego. Lack of teamwork comes from ego. Jealousy comes from ego. Baggage comes from ego. Complexes, inferiority complex and superiority complex comes from ego. So ego is a real drainer. Now, the flip side is the positive pride, which is great. Believe in yourself. Because when you believe in yourself, the whole world believes in you. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else believes in you. So really, it's that, right? So that's the big picture. Now, if you're interested, I can tell you the 7 steps. But if it's it's too long.
I'll find the 7 steps. You've published it, so it's available for me to find.
Absolutely.
What